Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me again today is our reluctant co-host, Assistant Chief John Feddema. John, yes. Thank you for filling in because we were supposed to interview Chief Holger Dura, the new Prescott Fire Chief today, and apparently he wanted out of this so badly that he decided to block traffic for a bulldozer that was broke down on the roadway that already had somebody blocking traffic for it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I heard it on the radio, and I didn't realize what he was doing until I walked into your office, and you asked me what I was doing, and I didn't think fast enough. It's been a long day, and I should have come up with something better, and then I realized what he did to get out of it, so that'll certainly be something we have to follow up with later. You should
remember that. I will see him this evening and let him know. Of course, you can follow up because at 3:30 we have our first joint senior staff operational meeting, which I think is should be good, as long as he doesn't have to block the road for like a cow crossing, something. Yeah. I don't some reason to get out of it.
If it didn't show up for that one, then we'll go to him.
I was at a school crossing. The crossing guard was there. They looked like they were tired.
Yes, very helpful.
Break. Very helpful. You know, if they're tired, we're not sponsored by Rockstar Energy drinks, but. This is pretty good. It says it has electrolytes in it, and B vitamins. So it's got to be good for you. I'm not sure what taurine is, but it's followed by electrolytes.
Yeah.
Science.
Yes.
That's what it is. Yeah. And, you know, the first time I had an actual energy drink, John, was during the Goodwin fire several years ago because I was tired. I was still newer here. I'm from St. Louis. We've talked about that before. I really don't know a lot about wildland fires, so my job is to ensure that you have coffee and the command post, but that's about the extent of my expertise in that area.
Was that a segue?
It
from Rockstar to wildland fires?
It is.
Nice. All right, keep going. Keep going. That was very nice.
You said we had to get through this quick.
Yes, the skill is definitely improving. I like
it. But you know, I know you and Todd recently, you and Chief Abel talked about the potential wildland fire, and the conversation then I think included a magic 8-ball.
Yep.
And then about a week ago we had the cooperators meeting, and I went there and listened to everything that was happening. And typically the heavy wildland season, because what we know is that wildland season is like the windy season here, it's just year round.
Yep.
There's months where the winds are higher, and there's months where the potential for a wildland event are certainly greater. And typically, what I've been told is that June is, about 3 weeks in June, is really the time where people start to get a little more concerned about the basin. This year at the cooperators meeting, they said, we're starting to get a little more concerned about mid-May.
Mm-hmm.
Last check, this is mid-April, and we have a fairly significant fire burning in the Bradshaws called the Crooks Fire. Not one that is likely to get into Prescott Valley or Prescott, but is certainly a concern for residents who are looking at the smoke plume, which is sideways because of the wind.
Yeah. No, the season is always there, and I think we talked about it when Chief Abel was on. It's something that is always a threat to the community. You look at some of the fires that we've had here that have been fairly significant. It hasn't always been in, like you say, that typically very hot, dry season during mid-June. We're seeing a lot more, just kind of throughout. Obviously, we had a very nice monsoon season last year, but then that was followed with a very, dry winter. Mm-hmm. And so obviously the fuel moistures and everything is not great. And we're seeing that in the fire activity right now.
Right.
And you never know. I mean, that could be the big one for the season, and it's quiet, or that could just be the start of a very bad season. Right. It all takes starts. I mean, this area is always ripe for fires, and I think that's what people, come to expect. That's also why we are very active in the wildland community, supporting different teams, different training, different exercises, and supporting our personnel to go around the country to help support other agencies, because we need that support, especially on big fires like this.
Well, and already this year we've had some crews in Tennessee.
Yeah.
We did a crew swap in Texas, so we've had a crew there and then switch crews.
Yep.
And then we had single resources for incident management teams in New Mexico. Already the New Mexico folks are coming back. I think the Tennessee folks are coming back, pulling back on the Texas crew. And the reason for that is we are seeing conditions here that are concerning, especially with what's going on in the Bradshaws. We know that the federal government has had trouble hiring this year, some difficulties with getting the seasonal employees. States the same way. So there's more of a reliance on local resources, the local fire service agencies, to backfill when there is a fire. Yep. And we knew that going into the season. We certainly didn't expect it to happen at this time of year.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Last night at the meeting, we had the in-brief for the California Type 1 team. Sarah Clausen, the ranger for this district, said, we've already shut down the forest.
Sure.
And it's a result of this fire, but the question is, will those closures remain? Because normally it's May when they start to close them down.
Sure.
And that's an impact financially to our communities, though.
Oh, yeah.
The Whiskey Off Road's coming up in 2 weeks, and she doesn't know if they're going to be able to open the forest up for that event. And so that's an economic hit. But wildland fires are an economic hit. So which one?
Yeah.
And this is the time of year, though, that you're seeing more people going out camping because it's nice up here. So you have more chains being drug along the roadway and people throwing cigarette butts out the car windows, things like that. Just general carelessness.
Yeah.
But for us, we are pulling those resources back a little bit. And I talk about it in the review this week. You and I have talked, the battalion chiefs have talked. And I know this gets concerning sometimes for some of our folks when we say, hey, look, we're not sending out of state right now. And sometimes they take that as you're not supporting the Wildland program.
Sure.
And the fact of the matter is we are supporting the Wildland program, but we have to focus on our state first.
Sure.
But before that, even, we have to focus on our local and regional. Our priority is always getting the big red engines running out the door. We are struggling a little bit with some backfill. And so there's fewer folks we can send off district because we can't get people to come in and fill the overtime.
Sure. And I think you highlighted there, our backfill is a big driving force to our wildland program.
Sure.
And, it's always the challenge of allowing enough resources out to a point where we can fill those back in. We want to be good cooperators, good partners.
Right.
But again, we don't want to put such a burden on the personnel that are here trying to cover those shifts where they're getting burned out and we're having to then mandatorily hold people in positions. That's the worst case, and I know that's the worst feeling on our personnel side, so that's where it's our job to help manage that, knowing that we get along. It's a marathon to get through this whole season, and we're going to have to do our best to kind of draw this out without trying to wear folks out coming in for that backfill. And again, sometimes it looks like a no when it comes to an assignment or something like that. So again, I think it's just trying to create a healthy balance that is sustainable and supports personnel on both sides of it.
Right. And regarding the mandatory overtime, we heard loud and clear at the Partners Academy that many of the significant others are not thrilled with the idea of mandatory overtime. Now, we also recognize that's part of the job sometimes, but we don't want to purposely do things that then put us in a position to have to mandate that overtime. And I think there's a number of factors that are leading to our folks not necessarily wanting to come in on more overtime. There has been, over the last couple of years, a tremendous amount of overtime as a result of people being out sick for COVID, backfilling rescues, the general overtime that we have for people being injured or just regular sick. And then the call volume's been up so much that I think folks are just tired. And we totally understand that. And we certainly don't want to burn people out. That's not the intent. We do support the Wildland, and one of the reasons that we support it, and I've heard some of this in the Valley where some of the city managers down there, because of the presumptive cancer, now saying, well, what benefit is it to us to send our crews off district out of the state? And, we live in the wildland urban interface, so I think we understand it very well. And we have a California Type 1 incident management team managing the Crooks fire. Now, that doesn't happen if Arizona doesn't send resources to California to assist. This is a mutual give and take, so to speak. And Not to mention the fact that the level of training and expertise that our folks bring back to our area, so that in these situations we can stand up quickly, assess the incident, initial attack, and make a difference in the long-term outcome of the event. Yeah, that the importance of that can't be understated.
Yes, no, I think you're spot on in terms of a couple of aspects. If we're not participating in that, then that's going to create a trend. And other agents will be like, well, all right, well, we're not going to participate either. Not just because they don't want to, but you could easily create that trend out there where it's like, no, well, we haven't had a bad fire, so we're just going to do our thing. We rely on those agents. We're not even on this fire yet. I mean, we're attending briefings and that kind of stuff. And I know there's some local agencies that have representation because our folks are scattered. We're not even participating yet. Our hope is that as we get some of those back, we can support that. But there's agencies from all over the place that are up there supporting that. And again, it's like you say, that give and take where we want to be good partners. We want to be providing our folks out there when possible. And again, that second aspect is that training and education. It is invaluable going to a large incident and getting that comfort and expertise so that when we have one of those incidents ourselves, we have personnel that are trained, prepared, and comfortable to respond. Right. There's nothing fun about the Crooks fire and the challenge that come with it in the structures and in the topography that it's in. There's not a whole lot of people that are comfortable. No. And if you're not going out and getting that education, you're going to have to be hard pressed to be comfortable enough to retain anything right now.
Sure. And it's not that we are tone deaf to the presumptive cancer or some of the other challenges that folks throw out there and say, well, you shouldn't respond to this because there's this potential for this. The reality is we have a job to do. Yeah. We recognize that the job is dangerous. I mean, I don't know about you, but I knew that when I put up my right hand the first day, my first job in the fire service. It's a dangerous job. Sure. And over the years, we have gotten a lot better at mitigating those risks. We know we have an AFG grant in play right now. If that's successful, we'll be doing the full body scans for our folks to get a baseline on cancer. We approved $34,000 in particulate hoods. And I don't think the general public especially realizes that the hoods the firefighters wear to go into fires, they're Nomex, so they're not cheap to begin with. Sure. But that material that they're made out of just absorbs the carcinogens and sweat, and it soaks into the skin. Yeah. There's newer hoods out there that are supposed to prevent some of that. Yep. And I know we talked about it when we were looking at the budget, that if we're looking at an AFG grant and this amount to get a baseline of cancer for our folks, how could we say no to spending $34,000 on cancer preventative equipment? Yeah,
and I would tell you that's a great example of a piece of equipment that there's a noticeable difference. Yeah, wearing that into just some of our training, the flashover chamber, where sometimes you come out of that and you can shower for days and your hair stinks. You can smell it. And it was interesting because that changed that hood. I had the opportunity to demo one, and it made a noticeable difference just because of that barrier that was there. And it's like, man, if that's making that much of a noticeable difference, where I can tell that I don't stink nearly as bad coming out of that fire, that there's an added level of protection at that point. So again, like I say, we can't try to do one without investing some of those dollars in the other.
And at the same time, we still have a job to do. Oh yeah. Just because we don't. If we didn't respond to California, Oregon, New Mexico, Texas, Tennessee, wherever it is, that doesn't mean we're not still exposed to wildland fire. I mean, it's just part of what we do, especially in the Southwest, is fight wildland fires. And for me, I rest a lot easier at night knowing that our crews have the training necessary and knowledge and expertise. And I'll use an example. We're recording this on Wednesday. You and I both responded to a wildland event that had a structure involved the late morning, and Chief Carruthers was the battalion chief on duty. And when I hear him on the radio, I have no concerns about how an incident is going to go, because Chief Carruthers is very active off duty. He's an expert in his field. He knows what he's doing. He put more resources on that more quickly because of the weather conditions to get a good stop on it. The crews did a great job.
Oh, yeah.
That is all a result of supporting off-district response and sending people out to get that expertise and training. And that fire today, I think, serves as an example of it.
I agree. And you look at the logic with, looking at the cancer and the presumptive issue and say, hey, we're not going to participate because of the potential of this. It's no different than you look at last week we spent time with Kevin, and with the Mighty Oaks, and looking at the mental health aspect of it. And so you look at the EMS side of our house, there's a lot of trauma that is coming for our personnel related to that, a lot of post-traumatic stress in dealing with difficult calls. Infant deaths, children, all those things that leave people with struggling with the stress of the job. That's creating challenges for us that we're having to navigate as a department. Sure. We're looking at improving our mental health. We're looking at programs like the Mighty Oaks to help support our personnel when they are struggling.
Right.
You could take that same approach and say, well, because those incidents are causing this to our personnel, we got to get out of that business.
Yeah, not going to run it.
Not going to do it. So we're not going to get in that either. And part of it is you look at, we're trying to do that, like you say, and there is a risk, and it's how do we mitigate some of those risks and control those risks as best we can, while still doing our job.
Well, and I think the other thing that we've done is we have done a great job as the fire service at bringing to light the challenges of behavioral health in our field, the challenges of cancer in our field, almost to a fault.
Sure.
Because those are not what you put on a poster to try to recruit people to come work in the fire service. Hey, come work with us. We're a little messed up in the head at times, and we can get quite sick.
I can see what that poster would look like. I mean, you'd have, like I say, cancer, you'd have the biohazard symbol, you'd have divorce, you'd have a broken home. Yeah, that's not the best selling point.
No.
And we got to be careful that is, like you say, that pendulum, like, no, this is what's going to happen. That's not necessarily true. There's tools to help you have a healthy career, on both the mental aspect side and the physical side. And like I say, I think that's what we're trying to bring that pendulum back. Now, this is still a good job. Oh, yeah. I love what I do.
Oh, I do too. I wouldn't change it. And I know when I first started, I'd go for days blowing black soot out of my nose after a fire. And it wasn't a source of pride. And even back then, we understood, no, that you don't want all that particulate on your helmet. Clean the thing off. Yeah. Wash the gear. But we didn't have access to all of those things that we do today. We didn't have that same understanding. And so do I sit here today and think about, oh man, I exposed myself to all kinds of stuff early in my career? Honestly, I don't. I think back at my earlier career and think, and that was a blast. I wish I would have known some of this stuff, but we really, the career has been very rewarding. Yeah. For me, I think you feel similar.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's a lot to recruiting people in. Again, we go back to, it's important to send folks off district to get that training and expertise. Yep. But there's a balance we have to strike because our primary objective is serving our community.
Oh, yeah.
And part of serving our community is having that level of training, knowledge, and expertise to deal with a wildland event in our area. And we have some folks that are just outstanding in their field and recognized nationally. Yep. Chief Abel, Chief Carruthers, among others.
Yeah, many more. Yep.
Are people that folks look to. Yep. Chief Lucas with Prescott.
Sure.
Another one that's off. Now, looking at some of the trauma that we see, I know some Prescott folks had a pretty hard call yesterday, which would have been Tuesday. They had a Porta-John on fire with a park bench. Very serious.
Do you have pictures of that?
We do not. I wish we did. But I'm picturing pulling up on a Porta-John on fire, because it almost feels like, John, that turns into a hazmat incident at some point.
Yeah, no, there's nothing good coming from that.
And you want to make sure you're not splashing that water. Because if you're on a structure fire, you're getting splashed. You don't want that.
Nope.
Splashing.
You got to worry about the runoff and all kinds of things. Yes, that's a very dangerous situation.
What is that floating down the? Oh, yeah. I feel bad for him.
Yeah. Well,
I made sure I let the chief know that last night when I saw him.
Very good. Yeah, he can follow up on that based on the fact that he wasn't here. So I'm sure he was doing something better.
Yeah,
apparently.
That's true. He probably would have gone to that call rather than come on the podcast.
Seems that way.
I will say, in all seriousness, that we have formed a really good relationship with the new Prescott chief, with the new Prescott deputy chief, and I think we have a lot of opportunity on the horizon working together. We're already doing some things together that had not been done for a little while.
Sure.
Those things are coming back. And we're actually, today, when we're done here, we're going over for the first joint senior staff meeting to sit down and talk about operations types of things. And I think that's, just, again, another opportunity for us to bridge any gaps that may exist or strengthen the ties that we already have.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a necessary partnership. We work in coordination on training and programs and larger incidents, move ups, from one, even this morning with all the stuff we had going on, Prescott engines were running in Prescott Valley and heading all the way down to Dewey. So it is a partnership that is necessary because of just the area we live in. And I think it's awesome that what you guys are doing to help strengthen that.
Yeah. Well, and we know that we're going to start looking at accreditation again this year. We have to get the training in. But talking to Chief Dura, he's got to get ready for a re-accreditation in a few years. He's heavily involved in the accreditation process. And so he approached me and said, hey, can we do a joint standard of cover, which hasn't been done here before?
Sure.
And I think as we look to the future and we align infrastructure needs and align operational needs, doing a joint standard of cover makes sense because they don't have an effective fighting force without us, and we don't have an effective fighting force without them.
Sure.
We rely on each other, and I think there's I think we're going to be able to put a standard of cover together that, one, is very strong and supports the infrastructure needs and working together.
Yeah.
I think just based on some conversation we had earlier, and this will unfold over the next year or two, I think we're gonna show why we need some stations sooner rather than later, as we look at some of the newer data and the population density and what they call urbanicity, which is your urban, suburban, rural frontier. The data is going to tell us what we need.
Sure.
And I think going for accreditation will support that as we move through it and go to the board and the community and say, here's what this says.
Yeah.
Here's where we're at.
If we always try to paint it as we're perfect, then we don't need to change anything. And I think part of, as we see the call volume increasing and our reliabilities obviously decreasing along the way, we do have some decisions to be made. The community continues to grow, call volume continues to increase. We have to adjust, and it's not always a popular topic, but I mean, there's also areas we know, like we're probably going to need a station there.
Yeah.
And we can't always predict where the developments go. I mean, we try to listen, we try to have the pulse on what's going on, but you can't always predict it. And so there's going to be some challenges ahead as we look at some of that data and say, you know what, we got some areas where we need some improvement on, and we're going to make some harder decisions.
Well, and it's interesting for me, growing up in an area outside of St. Louis that grew rapidly over the years. I mean, just expansion, crazy growth. But it grew mainly from the inside out.
Sure.
The interesting thing here is that we see development a lot of times that goes from the outside in.
Yeah.
Well, then when people start moving into those outside developments, they realize, hey, it's like 15 minutes to get a fire engine here.
Yep.
Yeah, we know that. It would have been better for a development to start closer to town and move out, and then we could grow with it. But when you start throwing developments way outside of the developed area, well, now there's response time challenges. And we can't put a fire station out for every development.
No.
As much as we would like to.
Sure.
It's just not possible.
Yeah.
We have some potential other growth coming in that we'll talk about on future episodes, but I appreciate you filling in last minute. I'm sorry
Always
that
enjoy.
when I ask you a question, you should use a little more caution in your approach.
A good reminder. I was tired.
Yeah,
I was
that's
tired.
true.
I was
That's
worn
true.
down. Yeah, you got me.
You know, the president of Yavapai College today, Lisa Ryan, she caught me in that because I got up in front of Prescott Valley Economic Development Foundation, I'm an ex officio member, and I asked the question, who here has an HR manager that they really like? And immediately she looked at me and said, Chief, That sounds like a loaded question. And I said,
Why she's at the college?
Yeah, you are absolutely correct, Doctor.
Yeah.
Because we are looking for an HR manager here at CAFMA. Kind of difficult to hire in this area right now. So you try to steal other people.
Clearly, she is much smarter than I, so
yes,
not a surprise.
She was on top of it. She nailed it right away. The superintendent for Humboldt Unified's like, oh yeah, I love my HR person. I'm like, perfect. You don't have to give me your address. I know where you're at, and we can make sure we send the mailer directly to her.
Perfect.
So with that, John, thank you so much. Joda, thank you again. Sorry we had to keep moving this, but I blame the chief of Prescott.
Indeed. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's not our fault. So till next week, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in. We look forward to talking to you very soon.